So what if the stage you're walking on right now is actually, watching you right back?
Oh, that is a creepy thought.
Right. But usually when we talk about reality, there is this really ingrained expectation of permanence. Like, we treat the physical world like an entirely fixed, passive background.
Yeah, totally. Like you drop a stone and physics just dictates that it falls.
Exactly. You walk down your street, and your house sits precisely on the foundation where you left it. It's just a given.
Right. We assume the universe is just this container and we are just moving through it. I mean, it's a comforting thought, but it might actually be fundamentally flawed.
Which is exactly the mission of today's deep dive. Welcome in, everyone. Today, we are exploring a really strange, fascinating intersection between two completely different sources.
It's a very different world.
For sure. On one hand, we have Phantom MERIDIAN, which is this piece of weird fiction following a surveyor who is trying to map a landscape where the physical geometry quite literally refuses to hold still.
And on the other hand, we've got the inventory of remaining objects, which is, a very grounded literary reflection by a displaced warehouse worker documenting the gentrification of his own neighborhood.
Now, on the surface, those sound totally unrelated.
Yeah, I mean, one is a sci-fi exploration of bending dimensions, and the other is a meditation on economics and urban decay.
Right, but they're both actually asking the exact same question. Like, what happens when the reality you rely on just begins to dissolve?
And more importantly, they both point toward a hidden truth. That reality isn't just a static background. It is actively created or formatted by our attention.
Yes, by our expectations and our continuous observation. So to really understand how this works, we need to leave the normal world behind for a minute.
Let's do it.
I want you to picture an impossible frontier settlement called Vanth. It's located deep in the Edralane Basin. This is the setting of Phantom MERIDIAN.
Right, where we follow the surveyor, Kael Muren.
Yep. Muren arrives with what seems like a simple job, just map out the land claims for new settlers.
But he immediately encounters this legal warning that, honestly, should have just sent him packing right then and there.
Oh my gosh, yes. The contract.
Yeah, to even live in Vanth, settlers have to sign a contract acknowledging that the ruling authority makes absolutely no guarantees regarding ontological stability.
Which is such a terrifying phrase. Ontological stability.
Seriously.
They aren't just saying, oh, the weather is bad. They are legally absolving themselves if existence itself decides to shift.
And it does shift. The physical breakdown of reality in the settlement is so visceral, it's completely disorienting.
Give us an example. Because it really messes with your head.
Well, think about the basic sensory experiences we just take for granted. Muren steps out after a rainstorm expecting mud, but instead the ground feels like yielding skin.
Ugh. The fleshy ground.
Right. It possesses this strange, fleshy elasticity that actively presses back against the soles of his boots. It's not soil, it's a surface reacting to him.
And then there's the well. This part is so wild. There is a 22-meter deep water well right in the center of the settlement.
Oh, the well with no echo.
Yeah. Muren leans over, drops a stone, yells down into it, and there is zero acoustic return. None. No echo at all.
Which is impossible, right? Physically, an echo requires sound waves to bounce off a rigid surface and travel back to your ear.
Exactly. But this shaft doesn't reflect energy. It simply absorbs or, receives the voice. The basic physical properties of sound are just missing.
But the anomaly that truly breaks Muren's grip on reality has to do with his actual profession. I mean, Muren is a surveyor.
Right. His entire worldview is math.
Exactly. It relies entirely on Euclidean geometry. The math that dictates parallel lines never meet, and the angles of a triangle always add up to 180 degrees.
The stuff we all learned in high school.
Right. So he goes to measure the distance between three fixed points in the settlement: a rock formation, a post, and a building. He locks the angles in perfectly.
And the next morning, the angles don't close.
Nope. The points themselves haven't actually walked away, but the physical space between them has warped. The spatial geometry just fluctuates on a daily basis.
It would be like measuring your kitchen table at night and waking up to find it's mathematically impossible for a tablecloth to fit over it, even though the table looks exactly the same.
That's a great way to put it. So to figure out what is happening, Muren tracks down this banned text by Dr. Aldous Kine.
Interpretations of threshold phenomena.
That's the one. And Kine proposes this incredibly radical theory. He says Euclidean space is not an inherent law of the universe.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because that feels incredibly counterintuitive.
I know, it does.
If Euclidean math isn't a fundamental law of physics, Then what is it?
Well, Keene argues that it's a format. It is a structural overlay that gets forced onto the raw, chaotic substrate of the universe.
So the universe isn't naturally orderly.
Not according to Keene. Think of the universe in its natural state as an untamed, overgrown wilderness. Over millennia, billions of human minds have looked at reality and expected it to behave in a specific, predictable, flat way.
Okay,
We have collectively walked the same mental path for so long that we've literally trampled the physics into a shape that makes sense to us.
Wow. So human observation acts as a stabilizing force.
Exactly. It's essentially the quantum observer effect, but on a massive macro scale. Reality only settles into a fixed state because we are looking at it.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a cosmic desire path. We expect reality to be flat, so the universe just capitulates and stays flat.
But Vanth is a distant frontier. It doesn't have thousands of years of human observation holding it down yet.
Right, the desire path hasn't been worn in.
Exactly. Because of that, the space in Vanth is highly labile. It is probabilistically shifting. It's constantly trying to revert to its natural, raw, chaotic state.
Which leads to the most dangerous part of living in Vanth. What happens when you remove human observation completely?
Oh, the trough.
Yes. In the book, they experience something called the Trough. It's an 18-day period where the sun literally never rises above the edges of the basin.
Total, continuous darkness for over 2 weeks.
And without the formatting power of light and human vision to enforce those Euclidean rules, the raw substrate just actively rises up.
Yeah, the physical space around the settlement expands hyperbolically.
Okay, wait, how does that actually work in physical terms? I'm trying to picture hyperbolic expansion.
Sure. Imagine taking a piece of crumpled paper and trying to flatten it out. The surface area is actually much larger than the flat space it occupies, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So in the trough, the math of the universe basically unfolds like that crumpled paper. Distances stretch exponentially. You might walk what feels like 40 meters, but you have actually traversed 100 meters of actual folded space.
And the geometry curves away from itself at every point.
Exactly.
And the human body really isn't designed to move through folded space, which completely explains what happens to the character Pell.
Oh, Pell. Yeah, poor guy.
He's a young settler who just wanders out into the darkness during the trough.
Hmm.
And he doesn't dissolve or die, miraculously.
Yeah.
But the environment forces his biology to adapt to the new math.
When he returns, he has these elongated, multi-jointed hands.
Right. His hands become physically hyperbolic.
He develops extra knuckles and joints so his fingers can articulate through extra spatial dimensions. He literally expands to meet the new, unformatted reality.
You know, listening to how Muren fights this literal breakdown of physics, it makes me realize something. You don't actually need to travel to a sci-fi frontier to experience that exact kind of reality collapse.
Nope, you really don't.
You just need to lose your job in a modern, gentrifying city.
And that is the perfect bridge to our second source, the inventory of remaining objects.
Yes, the mechanism of collapse is different, but the emotional reality is completely identical.
We move from the bending dimensions of the Edgerline Basin to the very grounded Penforth district.
So here we meet an unnamed 51-year-old narrator. He spent 17 years working on the loading dock of a local warehouse. He knows the space intimately.
He knows every inch of it.
And then, just abruptly, he is fired. And he isn't replaced by a younger worker. He is replaced by a camera and a predictive algorithm.
What the author is highlighting here is the tragic erasure of embodied knowledge. I mean, over 17 years, this narrator developed a profound, intuitive physical literacy.
He knew things a machine just couldn't know.
Right. He could look at a wooden shipping crate, observe how the grain was compressing, and know its weight within 2 kilos without ever putting it on a scale.
That's amazing.
He could glance at a sprawling shipping manifest, and his brain would just instantly flag an anomaly. He had a feel for the reality of the work.
But an algorithm can't feel wood compression. An algorithm only reads data fields.
Exactly. To the corporation, his calloused physical expertise wasn't an asset at all. It was an inefficiency.
He was reduced to just a skill set. Yeah. And because his specific skill set didn't match the sterile data models of the company's new operational trajectory, his reality was completely invalidated.
And the sad part is, this invalidation extends far beyond his job. His entire neighborhood is undergoing what he calls replacement.
Right. But it's not just that things are being torn down.
No, the original places are being demolished and replaced by hollow copies of themselves. They're simulacra.
Which is something I think everyone listening can relate to. Think about your own city for a second. Have you ever seen an old functional hardware store get bought out, slapped with a new coat of paint, and turned into an artisanal makerspace?
Oh, absolutely. And they sell you the exact same hammers for triple the price.
Yes, that is the Penforth district. The most cutting example in the text is the local dive bar where the actual dock workers used to drink.
This part is so brutal.
It gets bought out and replaced by a craft cocktail experience, and they have the absolute audacity to sell a $12 drink named the dock worker.
I mean, they are literally selling the aesthetic of the working class to the wealthy people who just displaced them.
It is the gentrification of memory. The district is consuming its own authentic history and just excreting it as a sanitized, monetized product.
But the narrator points out a really crucial detail about that bar. The cocktail bar actually knows it's a copy.
Right. The staff, the decor, the menu, it's all highly self-aware.
The irony is intentionally baked into that $12 price tag. And this is where the two sources really overlap for me.
Oh, how so?
Well, that self-aware cocktail bar is essentially the economic version of Kine's threshold zone in Vanth.
Oh, wow.
The old authentic reality, the original format, is bleeding through, but only as a highly priced simulation.
That is such a good point. Faced with realities that are dissolving, one into hyperbolic geometry, the other into corporate simulacra, the human instinct is just to find an anchor.
Yeah, we desperately need something to hold on to. And we see characters in both texts employing the exact same coping mechanism. They just refuse to let go of the old format.
In Phantom Meridian, that anchor is a merchant named Thomas Braille.
Braille is such a fascinating character.
He really is. While the entire settlement is literally bending into impossible saddle shapes, Braille is out there stubbornly building perfectly square rooms.
He insists on trading his goods using strict double-entry Euclidean ledgers.
He even plants traditional crops in soil that fundamentally wants to grow spirals. He just forces the universe to accommodate his flatness.
He becomes a living fixed point. He uses his stubbornness as a counterbalance, providing a flat baseline against which the terrifying new geometry can actually be measured.
Because without him, the settlement might lose its grip entirely.
Precisely. And the displaced warehouse worker in the inventory is doing the exact same thing, just, in a tiny apartment.
Right. He loses his job, he loses his neighborhood, so he starts maintaining his own internal ledger.
He lies awake at night, obsessively counting the physical objects in his room. A salvaged wooden chair, a scratched institutional folding table.
He's focusing on their obdurate, undeniable, their ness. Like, an algorithm can erase his job, but it cannot erase the physical mass of that wooden chair.
And he also creates something he calls an anomaly budget, which I find so poignant.
Me too. He's surviving on dwindling unemployment checks, but he deliberately sets aside $169.50 every single month.
And he spends it on highly specific, irrational things. He buys terrible, bitter $2.15 black coffee at Herschel's Diner.
He buys physical print newspapers and those artificial root beer barrels from Gus, the guy who runs the corner newsstand.
It makes you think about your own routines, right? Do you have an anomaly budget? Are you buying a bad cup of coffee just to prove to yourself that a piece of your old neighborhood still exists?
For the narrator, spending that money isn't really a financial transaction at all. It's an act of ontological resistance.
And the catalyst for this entire budget is a single receipt from that diner.
Yes, the Herschel's receipt.
He ordered a meal that came to $11.47, but the automated tax software glitched. It printed an 83-cent tax charge instead of 82 cents.
A single penny of error.
Exactly. A glitch that the corporate algorithm just failed to account for.
He looks at that receipt and realizes that he is that penny. He is the remainder. He is the physical reality that the sterile data models missed when they paved over his entire life.
But, this brings up a really crucial tension in both stories.
What's that?
Well, we have Braille building square rooms in a curved universe, and we have the narrator buying bad coffee to fight off gentrification.
Right.
But is this actually a viable strategy? I mean, is holding on to a $2 cup of coffee really enough to stop reality from changing?
Because from the outside, it honestly just looks like desperate nostalgia.
The authors of both texts would completely agree with you. Fighting the substrate is ultimately impossible.
You can't anchor yourself to an expiring format forever.
No, you can't. To actually survive, you have to look deeper into the underlying fabric of reality and find a new way to exist. You just have to adapt.
Which is exactly what Kael Muren does in Vanth.
Right. The surveyor whose angles won't close realizes he just can't measure the town anymore.
So he ventures out into the Stave, which is this massive ancient forest bordering the settlement.
Now, given that his instruments are failing and the physics are actively hostile, walking into the deep woods feels completely suicidal.
It would be, if he were still expecting Euclidean rules to apply. But Muren alters his compass. He stops trying to force the forest into a flat map, and he begins tracking the anomalies themselves.
And what he discovers there is completely paradigm shifting.
Oh, absolutely.
The forest isn't just unformatted, chaotic space. It actually possesses its own deep, ancient formatting.
A fractal logarithmic formatting. The forest is actually the original settler.
It has been pressing its complex geometry into the soil for thousands of years.
So it isn't trying to destroy the human colonists at all. It is actually offering to complete them. It's offering to expand their sensory capabilities into extra dimensions, just like it did with Pell's hands.
This realization changes everything back at the settlement. A local carpenter named Wren decides to stop fighting the shifting space like Bryle was doing.
Right. He takes a totally different approach.
He studies how a twisting root joint from the forest manages to occupy multiple dimensions at once, and he invents this third language of architecture.
The bilingual buildings. Explain the mechanics of a bilingual building, because this is where the concept gets really beautiful.
So Wren designs structures where the interior living spaces are flat and Euclidean.
So they feel normal inside.
Right. They provide a cognitively safe, familiar format for the human mind to rest in. But the exteriors of these buildings are constructed to curve hyperbolically.
So they fold and swoop on the outside.
Exactly, mating perfectly with the alien mathematical environment outside. And by joining these two formats together, the buildings literally sing.
They achieve an acoustic harmony with the Edgerline Basin.
Wren didn't surrender to the chaos, but he didn't stubbornly resist it either. He created a synthesis.
That is so cool. Meanwhile, back in the highly gentrified Penforth district, the narrator has his own profound breakthrough about synthesis.
Right, he's at the diner drinking his resistance coffee.
Yep. And he overhears two women at the next table discussing wallpaper. And one of them casually remarks that maybe reality is just surfaces all the way down.
Which is such a striking phrase, surfaces all the way down.
It really is. And shortly after hearing that, the narrator reaches into his pocket and finds a second Niner receipt.
Identical to the one with the 83-cent error.
Exactly. But he never made a second transaction.
Finding that second, copied receipt completely shatters his worldview. It dismantles his entire project of cataloging original objects.
He realizes the fundamental flaw in his logic.
Right. There is no magical, untainted, original layer of reality hiding beneath the copies.
That old butcher shop he misses so much, it probably displaced a dry goods store, which displaced a dirt field. It truly is surfaces all the way down.
But if there is no original, authentic layer, I mean, if everything is just a copy of a copy, why does any of it matter? Why even bother counting the chairs?
Because the depth isn't located inside the physical object. The depth is located entirely in the attention you pay to it.
Oh, that's good.
Right? That terrible diner coffee isn't inherently more real or authentic than the $12 craft cocktail. It is only real because the narrator sits there and deliberately attends to it.
He realizes that his observation is the anchor, not the physical item itself.
This is the massive aha moment. Muren the surveyor was trying to measure mountains to lock reality in place. The narrator realizes he doesn't need to measure chairs.
So he stops counting the physical objects in his apartment.
And he starts counting his own breaths instead, because counting the breaths is the exact same mechanism as counting the objects.
In a world of simulacra and shifting dimensions, your own focused, deliberate presence is literally the only mathematically fixed point you can actually survey.
It is the act of attention that formats the world.
That's beautifully said.
So consider what this means for you, listening right now, navigating your own life. The phantom meridian that Muren was looking for isn't a line drawn on a physical map.
It's the relationship between the observer and the observed.
Measurement is a meeting. Reality, whether it's the literal physical dimensions of the universe or just the cultural fabric of your neighborhood, is never a passive container that you just walk through.
It is a continuous, active negotiation.
You format the world with your attention, and the world formats you right back.
It really is a profound responsibility, and it brings to mind one final haunting image from the inventory that I want to leave you with.
Oh, the newspaper delivery.
Yes. Every morning at Gus's newsstand, a teenager blindly drops off a newspaper printed in a completely unidentifiable language.
It's reserved for an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen.
Right. And the narrator eventually learns that this paper reports on the daily weather and the closed restaurants of a country that ceased to exist 36 years ago.
Wow.
The country only survives in our dimension because it is actively, daily inventoried by a newspaper that almost no one can read.
An entire reality kept alive simply by the focused attention of a daily delivery.
Exactly. So I ask you, if a vanished country can be sustained by observation alone, what parts of your own reality only exist right now because you stubbornly refuse to stop paying attention to them?
Keep your eyes open, count your remainders, and watch out for the shifting geometry in your own life. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.